session is truly focused on tying together the topics that we've explored during our trip and addressing how we truly move forward to implementation. Because how we are actually going to advance everything we've learned the last several days is in the implementation phase. When we asked as to who would be best to help deliver such a message, Carlee's name came forward immediately. Ron is Charlotte's city manager, and he is responsible for carrying out policy decisions as well as providing vision and leadership to the organization and overseeing the daily operations of city government. Ron is Charlotte's 11th city manager and has served more than 30 years in local government. He has experience leading partnerships with foundations, university, and the private sector. Ron and I shared that we're both originally from Alabama, and he did some great work in Alabama as well years ago, working for the Birmingham Mayor's Office. So please join me in welcoming Ron to the stage as he talks with us about Charlotte and how they've collaborated and mobilized both private and public sectors to effect change and implement successful initiatives.
Morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Get some water here. What a treat for you to get to hear Hugh McCall. And it really stinks that I have to follow. They didn't tell me that in advance. I understand he was a last-minute wonderful addition for you. Well, let me just say in brief, my job in Charlotte is to honor, respect, and build on the reputation and legacy of Hugh McCall. That really is my job, Hugh and the many other people who followed him. Thank you very much for letting me come speak to you, and thank you for coming to Charlotte. What an awesome group to get this many people to travel this far from two cities joined together is truly an amazing thing, and you should feel really proud of that. I was going to give you a really long and detailed data-packed PowerPoint this morning. I worked on it last week. I actually have it done. I worked on it some over the weekend. But I sat down last night with a glass of Kentucky whiskey, and I thought, you know, those are nice people. They make good whiskey. I should not PowerPoint. Now, I usually don't drink whiskey before I give a presentation the next day. The only time I've ever done that I can remember was I had an opportunity to speak in Scotland. And it turns out they are really proud of their whiskey. And the night before I was supposed to speak, they wanted me to try every whiskey they've ever made in Scotland. And I was so cotton-mouthed the next day, I didn't think I was going to make it. But at the end of that presentation, they presented me with a bottle of their whiskey. And I thought, this is so cool. This is the only presentation I've ever given where the speaker's gift was a bottle of whiskey. I'm just saying. So far, that's the only one. So if you want my long, elaborate PowerPoint, you can email me at rcarlee@charlottec.gov, and I'll be happy to send it to you. I'll be happy to do a webinar with you. I heard someone say they created a hashtag for Hugh McCall. On Twitter, you can follow me at Ron Carlee, and feel free to tweet. This morning, I have done one tweet for you, hashtag, what is it? Lulex? I looked up the thing and got it right. But I thought what I would do is just have a conversation with you. Looking at implementation, sort of the first question that arises in your even being here is, why Charlotte? Well, actually, I've only been here about a year myself. My anniversary with Charlotte was April Fool's Day. And so I occasionally ask my question, why Charlotte? And the reason are these. I think there are 5 compelling reasons why I came to Charlotte based on my observations that I think is a good match for you and that form the philosophical framework around implementation. Because one of the first issues in building community in building a city is understanding where you are and where you've been. And so what is it that brought me to Charlotte? I had lived in the Washington, D.C. area for over 30 years. I had worked 6 months shy of 30 years with Arlington, Virginia. I was manager there for the last 9 of those years, arguably, and by I think any objective metrics, one of the best communities in the country. And Washington, one of the best regions in the country. I was working with my International Professional Association, doing training and speaking and going to other countries and having a good life. So why would I come to Charlotte? What were the things that made this an attractive city? Well, I would say one of the first, and you will hear some reinforcement from the things that Mr. McCall was sharing with you. Charlotte is a real city. It is truly a real city. It has a real downtown that they call uptown. But you also have other thriving areas as well, the other nodes that you've heard about, especially Valentine and University City. And we have real sports and we have real arts. My wife likes to tell the story of how when she was living in Washington before we got together back many years ago, the Pope came to visit in Washington. And she went out to see the Pope, which was really interesting to her. But that night, she went to the Kennedy Center and she saw Baryshnikov and Patricia McBride dance. And that to her was one of the highlights of her life. Well, we have real arts in Charlotte as well. One of our early events that we attended was actually hosted by Mr. McCall, where he brought together some of the donors of the arts to appreciate what they had done, and I got invited to meet some of the people. And he actually hosted it at the North Carolina Dance Theater. And when we got there, one with the dance theater greeted us at the door, bubbly and enthusiastic about the arts and dance in Charlotte, and took us through and showed us the whole theater and what was going on, the great classes and everything. And my wife told her that story about how seeing Patricia McBride and Baryshnikov was more of a life-changing experience for her than even seeing the Pope. Halfway through dinner, we discovered that the woman taking us around the theater was Patricia McBride. Well, my wife was horrified to start with, and then she was in awe, because they'd been sitting out there talking about hairdressers and where to go and shop and all this kind of stuff. So it's a real city. It's a city with real things. One of the first issues I was presented with when I came to Charlotte was whether or not to contribute public funds towards some enhancements to Bank of America Stadium where the Panthers play. And what I learned and what had stimulated that investment, public investment before I got here, was a recognition that Charlotte had no contractual ties to the Panthers, which are owned by a gentleman who is getting older, who's had a heart transplant, and a team for which there are many buyers, especially in California. In fact, I'm pretty sure there was $1 billion offer on the table. And so the question for the city was simply this: do you want a pro team or not? Do you want a pro team or not? Is that important in terms of being a real city? And fortunately, they made the playoffs this year after we did that, and of course our basketball team is in the playoffs as well. So we have the things that make a real city. That was attractive to me, especially having the vibrant, thriving downtown area. Secondly, and this is one of the things that I think is most distinctively Charlotte, and you heard this very clearly from Mr. McCall, the business community is engaged. The business community is intensely engaged, literally in everything that we do in the city. And a lot of that credit does go to the leadership of the businesses themselves and the expectation that was set by Mr. McCall and his contemporaries, but also a lot of it is really due to the extensive leadership of the chamber. And this is the most engaged chamber that I have ever worked with and that I've actually ever seen. We also have a regional partnership, and we also are very engaged in public-private partnership through business improvement districts. And you may have encountered some of those along your way, particularly city center partners, which is critical to our downtown, as well as university city partners, which are developing the area around University of North Carolina, Charlotte, into a more vibrant, multi-use commercial node as well. Third, and this is what actually brought me here, specifically, Charlotte has an effective business-oriented government. Now, a lot of people don't even know what a city manager is. That's my job here in Charlotte. In fact, one of the former presidents of our association, he used to tell the story about how he never could get his mother to understand what he did as a city manager, and she would always introduce him as a city planner. And he said, you know, Mom, why do you tell people I'm a city planner? She said, well, people have some idea what that is. And so this has plagued our profession. In fact, our professional association will celebrate its 100th anniversary this fall, hosted here in Charlotte. But our job in our form of government, the council manager form of government, is not the political model of government that we're used to at the federal and state level, and that is common at the local level, with mayor and councils basically forming a check and balance. The council manager form of government is a business form of government where the mayor is the chairman of the board, the city council is the board of directors, and you hire a CEO to run the company. And it was that position that first introduced me to the idea of moving to Charlotte, and it was the reputation of both Charlotte and Mecklenburg County as long-term, for long-term, not only nominally the council manager form of government, but also a deep commitment to it. And the value of this form of government really is its resilience. And so let me share with you what other speakers probably have not. In my first year, I went through 4 mayors and 17 members on the council. Now, my first mayor got appointed Secretary of Transportation for the United States of America. That's a pretty cool thing. The second mayor was interim. She was from the council. She did not run for mayor. She ran for her District 1 seat and got reelected. I did a great job as interim mayor. My third mayor is entering a plea agreement in federal court this afternoon. That's a bad thing. I'm just saying. And then the fourth mayor, who's been on the job about a month now, had previously served on the city council and for many years had served Charlotte as a state senator and is bringing, hopefully, and I think obviously, some strong stability and strong history and strong relationships to the job. Now, most cities, if they had gone through 4 mayors in a year, there would be a little bit of chaos, I think. And I think what you will, and I know what you will find in Charlotte is in fact the opposite. And it is because the form of government is designed to be resilient and to be about more than one person. When I came in as manager, as the 11th manager, as you heard in the bio, the city managers don't come in with a whole new team. And so the department directors that served under my predecessors, some of them appointed 2 predecessors back, are still the executive leadership of the city. They're competent professionals appointed based on their ability and not based on their political relationships. None of the positions are appointed by the mayor or council, and they're designed to transcend different terms of mayors and councils. The mayor and the council provide the policy direction. They provide important visionary leadership. It is our job to carry out that vision and to do so regardless who's elected. And so after a transition of 4 mayors, there's still the same city manager, the same police chief, the same fire chief, the same planning director, the same transportation director, and the same people doing the work. The form of government in Charlotte is resilient and enables us to plan and implement beyond election cycles. And that's important in Charlotte because this is one of the things that was most interesting to me. The mayor and the 11 council members members serve 2-year concurrent terms, everybody up for election at the same time. So the opportunity for radical change at the political level is there, yet by being a council manager form of government, stability and long-term planning and implementation is reserved at the administrative level. Number 4, and this is really an important basis for Carlee's success and our implementation in the future, is one of the things that Mr. McCall mentioned in the Q&A. Charlotte is a welcoming community. Now, you guys are from the South yourself, and so I'm assuming, having spent only small amounts of time in each of your cities, that they're pretty welcoming as well. But I'm going to tell you, the people in Charlotte are really welcoming. And when people come down from the Northeast, it scares them. People talk to you on the street. I'm talking about more than just the panhandlers. And even coming from the Washington area, my wife still marvels at the level of friendliness and interchange that she has with people on the street and in the stores. It is a place that is truly, truly friendly. It is a core value. And what is so fascinating about it is that everybody is from somewhere else. One of my favorite questions when I speak to audiences in Charlotte is I ask, how many native Charlotteans are in the room? Well, let me ask you, how many native Charlotteans are in the room? That's about the same number I get in the presentations in Charlotte. They're pretty rare. Most of the people actually have immigrated from somewhere else. Fortunately for me, as you heard, I'm from Alabama, so I didn't have to learn the language. But we truly have become a mosaic of a lot of people from a lot of different places, yet somehow, rather than creating a wild diversity of values, people seem to center around and get attracted and assimilated to the idea of being welcoming and friendly to one another. There is also, and maybe this is part of it, a very, very strong faith community here. The churches are very involved. I am not known as the biggest church person in the world necessarily. And my boss at ICMA, when I told him I was considering coming to Charlotte, first of all, he was not positioned well to try to talk me out of it because he had tried to come to Charlotte 20 years ago himself and had been in the same situation, so he had no credibility there. But he would just suddenly tell me every once in a while, Ron, you know it's a very religious city. Ron, it's a really religious city. And it is a really religious city, and in a good way. Because I believe that those values spill over into the community and contribute to that welcoming environment. And the faith community helps people who come in from other places get connected and find something more than a business home. And so partnering with the faith community is important. It is also welcoming in a way that is in conflict with some of the rest of North Carolina. Last year, the Gay Lesbian Pride Parade, has some other name now, which I can't remember, was reinvigorated in Charlotte. And not only did our interim mayor, ride up front in the parade, every major business in this city was a sponsor of the parade. Every major business. The grocery stores, the banks, the hospitals, they were all there demonstrating a welcoming environment. And by having people from all over the place, I think there is a willingness in the city to experiment and reinvent. But most importantly, the number one thing that was attractive to me about Charlotte is that it is a city of intent and aspiration. I have visited other cities. I visited a lot of cities over my career, especially when I was working with ICMA, International City County Management Association. And I've been to cities where they think they figured it out. If you think you figured it out, you're on a pathway to decline. And with as many things that are strong and working in this city, there is a strong sense that we can do more, that we can be better, that we can get to even another stage. And that is where the key question of implementation arises. And so in order to take the city to the next level, the things generically that are really critical are where I started. Where are we? Where have we been and what is important to this city? What are the strengths upon which we are building, and how do we make sure that we honor those and exploit them going forward in a positive way? And then what is our vision for the future? How do we plan for it, and how do we actually get to action? There are three areas that I think are critical in moving toward implementation, whatever one's vision is and whatever one's plans are. For Charlotte, that vision is really around becoming truly a global community. And that is aspirational. When you think about global communities, you think about Brussels and Paris and London and Tokyo and iconic places that everybody knows, and they know what they are about. And to aspire to that is a lofty and ambitious thing to do. But we believe because of where we are situated, we believe because of the foundation that we have, we can do that. We also really want to develop a more diverse economy, and as you heard Mr. McCall reference, one that is more about entrepreneurs, small business, and creativity. It's a gap. We want to fill that gap. It's not just about big institutions. Our two rich uncles died. They left their buildings here, and they left a lot of family here. And they're still really strong anchors, but they need to be anchors that root us and not drag us down. And for people who sit around and long for the good old days when the presidents of the two banks and the CEO of the energy company could sit down and make decisions and make it happen, are just wishing. It's a fantasy. It's not going to happen. And so we've got to honor and attract and use those large institutions like the banks and Duke Energy and the MetLife and the Siemens and Electrolux. But we need those small entrepreneurs and the creative people to come and think of new and different ideas to build the Charlotte of the future. A large part of that vision and plan is around transportation. I think you had an opportunity to see our intermodal yard at the airport. You all are aware of the airport. I know there was a question in an earlier session about how in the world did Charlotte get an airport that big? You don't deserve it. Well, we don't. We don't have enough passengers originating and departing from this city to justify that airport, but because of some visionary thinking and execution, we developed an airport where the investments occurred only when identified demand existed, driving costs low, so that we are by far the most profitable airport in the American airline system, by at least a factor of 2. And so it was through the airport and creativity there that the intermodal yard in partnership with Norfolk Southern was developed. And now we're trying to truly go multimodal. And this is the critical decision for cities of the future. We have to be multimodal, and that means transit. And the light rail system, which you've heard so much about, was controversial in its early days, as I am told the story. It's embraced by everybody today. It's the most wonderful thing that's ever occurred. And you see the benefits on the South End, and it will truly be transformational as this next extension goes from the center city up to the university. But that's not enough. The other multimodal leg that we're working on is what's called the Links Gold Line. If you walked around to Trade Street, and just south of there, you saw it all torn up. Barricade and a real mess down by our transit center. That is the installation of phase 1 of our Links Gold Line streetcar. Hugely controversial. So controversial that when it was first presented to the city council the year before I came, there was a deadlock on the council and the mayor vetoing the budget, such that the city actually reached a stalemate on a revision to the community investment plan. We've broken that stalemate now. We're going after funding for phase 2 and phase 3, which will take rail beyond the center city out into our older corridors to the east and west of the city. The real economic opportunity and transformation that will occur won't be for probably 20 years. But you don't get to your vision 20 or 25 or 30 years from now if you don't start with action today. And those rails going into the street on trade is the beginning of that vision. But that's also not enough. We need rail to the north. We need a commuter rail connecting our neighbors up there. We need some kind of transit going to our southeast and connecting below the city. One of the things that is a reality that we have to embrace, even in a city that is so fundamentally committed to cars, is that the current generation doesn't want them. They don't want the expense. They want to spend their money on eating and drinking and having fun, not on insurance and car payments. And unless we're going to create dynamic urban environments where people can take transit and can walk and bike, we will not be able to attract and hold the generations of the future. So within the city, from a very specific implementation standpoint, we're organizing around global competitiveness and economic development, transportation and planning, the environment, housing and neighborhood development, and community safety. The three keys across all of those 5 intersecting areas would be these I would offer to you. 1 is leadership, 2 is managing complexity, and 3 is managing law. Very briefly, leadership is at the core of any successful social endeavor. Any of them. And as you heard, the history of Charlotte is deeply related to the leadership in this community, particularly from Mr. McCall and his contemporaries and their partners within the city government. Leadership today is much harder. It's more diffused, it crosses the different sectors, and none of the people in leadership today control the kinds of resources that Mr. McCall controlled in the past, including the CEO of Bank of America. The rules and regulations today do not permit banks to do the kinds of things that they did in the past. And so we have to come together. More of us, it's not 3 guys sitting around having drinks around the golf course. It's a whole lot of men and women across the commercial sector, the academic sector, the nonprofit, the philanthropy sector, and the governments coming together to form a more complex and network relationship to come to consensus on the visions and to bring the resources to implement them. One of those efforts underway right now is redevelopment of the area on North Tryon Street. On South Tryon, where all the great art institutions are, that was basically leveraged by the leadership of the past in that traditional way that you've heard. To the north, we've got a much more complex set of actors at the table, knowing that that area is suboptimal now. It's inside the Inner Beltway. I mean, it's down the street from everything else, and it's just not performing. It's an eyesore. We're committed to making that the next big idea to transform in Charlotte. But we've been working now, I would say, for about 3 to 4 months just to come to agreement on what kind of consulting support we want to bring in to help us. In the old days, people just sat down and made a decision. We're working in a more difficult leadership environment today, and part of that is going beyond the business community, and this is one of the challenges for Charlotte, and that is becoming more engaged with the citizenry themselves at the grassroots level. Someone asked the question about urban renewal in downtown back in the 60s. There are deep scars to that in this city. There are deep scars. If you talk to members of the African American population from Charlotte, I will tell you they still have the scars from urban renewal, because it didn't wipe out a public housing project, it wiped out an entire community. It wiped out an entire community. We cannot repeat that mistake. As we take our public investments in transit into new areas of the city, the transformation needs to be done with the people who live there so that they can stay there and continue to live and be a part of their neighborhood and be part of the planning and be part of the transformation themselves and not driven out. That is a more difficult thing to do. And that's part of managing complexity. We have overlapping governments. We have a city and county government. We have 6 towns, but we're part of a much larger region that crosses 2 states. One of the biggest surprises I found when I came here is that Charlotte is the largest city in South Carolina. And we need to be thinking that way, because the port at Charleston, as the Panama Canal opens, is going to be one of the most important economic connections for this city. And we also operate in a city where we do not have home rule. We have had the General Assembly come in, you may have heard some stories about this, and get involved with the governance of our airport, which is very controversial and tied up in litigation right now. This session of the General Assembly, they took away our ability to tax businesses so that local governments are left only with a property tax as the only source whose rate we can control. We have sales tax and some other things, we don't control them, they're capped. And so the only thing we're left with is property tax. So we have complexity that we have to deal with all these leaderships and things that happen that are outside of our control. Which brings me to my last point, and that is managing luck. I wish this were my original thought. But I have to give credit to Jim Collins. I heard him speak at ICMA a couple of years ago, and his thoughts on managing luck are really important. How many of you have read Jim Collins and his piece on return on luck? Return on luck. And so he's looking back on his good to great organizations, and he's trying to figure out, well, why did some of them do well, and why did some of them fall off? And so his theory was that maybe it was luck. Maybe some of them had good luck, and others had just bad luck. And as he operationalized luck and began a quantitative analysis, what he and his researchers found was that good and bad luck happen almost equally to good and bad companies. And thus his new concept and new theory is not whether or not luck happens. You know that term, luck happens? It's how you manage it. It's what you do with it. And can you turn bad luck into your favor? Can you show that you can manage bad luck? And when good luck occurs, can you take advantage of it? My run in Arlington was unbelievably successful. We built so much here in those times, and it actually survived values during the recession. National financial publication described Arlington as one of the best communities to be in during the recession. But it wasn't luck that enabled us to take advantage of the boom of the early part of the last decade. It was the plans that had been developed and the competent ability of the city to implement them for when good times occurred. But when terrorists attacked the Pentagon in Arlington, and when the economic downturn came, we were also structured to be resilient and to deal with those in an effective way. And that same challenge exists for all cities. And so the bad luck that I've seen in my first year in Charlotte include the mayor being arrested. That was a new one for me. I'm at a cabinet meeting of all my department directors, and we're hearing a presentation about some new social tools to use in civic engagement. It's all really good government, exciting, positive things. And my assistant comes in and pulls me aside, Ron, the FBI is serving a search warrant on the mayor's office. You better go upstairs. Okay, I think I will. I think the police chief and city attorney will go with me. But what we can show is that this is a resilient city, and that even if one person does bad things, it does not bring this city down. It does not slow us down. We are undaunted. Everything that we've been working on for the past year, the past 5 years, are proceeding forward just as aggressively as they otherwise were. We've had the legislative intrusion in the airport. We've had the loss of business taxes. We had a paralyzing snowstorm. We had PCBs dumped into our sanitary sewer system. I think I may have brought this city bad luck. But can we get a return on it? And can we manage good luck? The economy is trending up right now. 2 new office towers have been announced for downtown. Our pro teams are doing great. We've opened a new baseball stadium that's sold out. I mean, it's just phenomenal what is going on there. Our population is growing, and our property values are increasing, and people are getting jobs, and people are coming to Charlotte. Can we manage that well? Can we manage good luck and bad luck in order to ensure that we continue to have a real city, and perhaps a global city? One that is built on partnerships with an engaged business community. Can we continue to keep our government resilient and effective and professional? Can we maintain that welcoming and open spirit? And if so, we will achieve our vision and actions. And most importantly, we will continue to create a city that people are proud to call home. Thank you very much for letting me talk to you. Behind. So do we have time for a few questions? You'll let me know when you want me to get off stage. Any questions?
I've heard the story now twice that 2 rich uncles died. I think I know who they are, but if you could explain who they were.
Yep.
And then how long has the city been dealing with this new fractured, multidimensional leadership structure?
Right. The 2 rich uncles were the presidents of the 2 banks, but I would say the 3rd rich uncle was CEO for the Duke Energy. So it was Nations Bank in Wachovia, Duke Energy, and then the CEO for Belk Department Stores is sort of a 4th part of that group, business leaders that basically determined the future of Charlotte in those earlier days. And fortunately, they were incredibly visionary, public-minded people with a deep social conscience. And so we do rest on their shoulders today. And so the fracturing probably began to occur, as best I can tell, really around the middle of the first decade of this century. The banks began to, as the mergers occurred, and as the economic downturn, and as people like Mr. McCall began to age and to retire. And so I would say that we're actually in the transition of figuring out the strong leadership. And one of the things I do is spend a lot of time at the institutional level with the president of the chamber, with connectivity in the business community, the CEO for the Foundation of the Carolinas. I don't know if you've had any exposure to the Foundation for the Carolinas. A lot of the wealthy people, a lot of people made a lot of money in this city, have really concentrated their giving into the foundation. It is an unbelievable asset that is very connected through the philanthropy community with the CEO for Center City Partners, particularly focused on how we advance downtown. The county manager, my counterpart on the county side. We have an interesting division of labor with the county. We try not to duplicate, and so there are things that the city does that it does for the whole county, such as police and utilities. and that there are things that the county does that we don't duplicate that they do for the whole city and county, such as parks and recreation and library. So there's been functional consolidation. So that's an important relationship. And then school superintendent. Someone asked me about education. Education really is important. And so among the institutional leaders, we're the ones that are trying to figure some of this out and then connect with the elected leadership and the commercial leadership through our facilitative roles on the institutional side, if that makes any sense to you. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
So what role do millennials play in the leadership portion of your 3-tier as you move forward in Charlotte?
No, I think that's a gap. I truly do. I think we have opportunities there that are encouraging to me. One is on increasing connectivity with our academic institutions, particularly of course, University of Charlotte, North Carolina, and the community college, but also Johnson C. Smith and Johnson and Wells. So increasing the leadership of those institutions are very connected. What we've got to do is a better job of actually connecting the students within those. I think on the city side, we're doing that fairly well for those who are in public administration. But that has truly got to go deeper. And then there are programs like Leadership Charlotte. I'm sure you have those kind of programs in your cities that become very important for connectivity as well. We also have some pretty good programs for the high school seniors, and I think there's an opportunity to actually engage them even more strongly. So I would say among the things that if you look at this business patriarchy that we've had historically, our challenge to meet the needs of the future is building more grassroots support that includes both young people and neighborhood people, as well as not losing the connectivity of people. All right, again, thank you very much for coming to Charlotte. Thank you for letting me
Ron, thank you very much for your thoughts and insights about Charlotte and your role as the city manager. One of the things you had mentioned at the beginning of your talk was that you had been with a group of people that had presented you with some Scotch whiskey. Now we've got something to go with that, and that's a bottle of water, because now you can have Scotch and water. But if you really want some nice, fine, golden brown liquid, we'd like to present you with some Woodford Reserve bourbon on behalf of GLI, Commerce Lexington, and Commonwealth of Kentucky. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. This is totally awesome, and I do know that the Scottish would not have whiskey without bourbon barrels. So thank you very much.